welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and this video we're breaking down You Only Live Twice.
You only live twice, or so.
Featuring the first appearance of Blofeld on film, this established the big bad of Bond in one of his most iconic ways. Though Dr. Evil spoofed him to oblivion, and this movie has Bond getting disguised as a Japanese man, which may not have aged well, overall this is regarded as one of Connery's best. However, it would also lead into him stepping back from the role. Connery would be recast in favour of George Lazenby, with him starring in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. After this, Connery would only live twice, as he'd then return for Diamonds Are Forever. He'd then do Never Say Never Again, which was an unofficial film. So what was it about this movie that made him step back, and does it still deserve the high esteem it gets? Well, throughout this video, we're going to break it all down and go through the film and also the book. Hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed, and make sure you subscribe as we continue our breakdowns. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into You Only Live Twice.
Goodbye, Mr. Bond.
Now, the movie had a lot of weird things surrounding it. We are of course going to be going through the book and how that differs from the way things are played out in the movie. Just looking at the grander scheme of things though, this really alters the order of Fleming's work. Though this story is the first time we see Blofeld on screen, the book actually ends the Blofeld trilogy, or the Spectre trilogy as it's known. That starts with Thunderball, and then it's followed by On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That was actually supposed to be the film that followed that, but production issues quickly rose. Getting the right location for the snowy setting was proving really difficult, and thus they switched things to this, which massively alters the tone. In that movie, spoiler alert, Bond's wife Tracy's murdered at the end by Blofeld and Bunt. So come You Only Live Twice, the guy's an absolute wreck and at the lowest point we've ever seen him. M basically sends him on this mission because he thinks there's no hope of completing it and he'd rather not waste a good man. Though there is the hope this might snap him back. I did wonder if him losing Aki was even trying to set up him losing a quote-unquote wife, though they don't delve to the depths that Bond is in the book. All that pain, anguish and thirst for revenge, that's all stripped away because this is the first time that Bond's met Blofeld. We also have the fact that this is the first film released after Casino Royale. Not that one, the shit one. Dropping 2 months earlier than this film's release, this spoof was a big send-up of Bond. Starring David Niven, he actually gets a nod in the work. There we learn more about Kissy Suzuki and discover she worked as a Hollywood actor. She said that Niven was the only man she met who seemed nice and didn't have ulterior motives. Fleming had actually wanted him as Bond, so the Casino Royale casting kinda made good on that. Now from what I can gather, Fleming was actually using some of Kissy's story to put his own on the page. It's believed that Fleming was burned out by Hollywood and he saw the business as being quite exploitative. However, in all of that, it's thought Niven was the actor that really looked out for him, and thus he included this in the book. Her being a Hollywood actor also explained how she could speak English so well, and kind of filled in a lot of her backstory. Kissy had ended up returning from Hollywood and would rather live in this beachside village, which you can also apply to Fleming and his GoldenEye ranch. I'll talk more about Kissy in just a bit, but it's clear there was a disconnect from the way things were going. That's something you really notice when reading the book, as bar a few characters, the work's completely different. This feels like it was the first time producers set out to show they didn't need Fleming's books. Whereas Dr. No, Russia, Goldfinger, Thunderball, they were all pretty much just them shooting those stories. This is where they start to do their own things. At this point, they nailed down the formula and were finally starting to get things in place. So you can see why they were getting bold, James Bond, when it came to what they were doing. That included their pitches as well. At this point in time, Bond was the biggest franchise in the world, and they even went with that mentality when approaching people. Initially, they went to Lewis Gilbert, who just made his name on the smash hit Alfie. He turned down the picture at first, but Cubby Broccoli said, and I quote, "You can't turn it down because the whole world's watching." Bond was so hot right now, and he knew the opportunity was too big to pass up. This is also kind of reflected with how they felt with Connery. The James Bond archive goes into the inner workings of his contract and how he'd initially signed one lasting 5 years. That brought an end to it on this film, which caused a big fuss at the time. Big fuss. Even though they'd said before shooting that this was his last one, the newspapers still went wild with it as a story. They also had to shoot all of Connery's scenes first, with production beginning in July 1966. His contract ran out November 4th, but things got a little tight. So they extended it and stuff wrapped up in March the following year. I do kind of get the idea that the two sides were kind of playing chicken with each other though. I kind of feel like, and this is based on nothing, I kind of feel like they were both seeing who was gonna give in first. Like, I had a job, yeah, side note, handing my notice in, yeah, and knowing that they needed me, but they also didn't want to pay me more. So I had this thing where I was like, well, I'm going now. Last shift, I'm out the door. I can hear you though, if you want to say anything about a pay rise. They didn't give me it though, but I basically think that's the same thing that happened with Bond. In the archives though, it said the producers basically had the mentality that Bond was what people were coming to see, not the actor. To them, that was the big draw, and they believed they could put a complete unknown in the role and it would still break the bank. Which yet, we'll see how that comes into play on the next movie. According to IMDb trivia, things were so bad between them and Connery that he refused to act if the producers were on set. But Gilbert signed up, and they then started on the script. Gilbert returned several times to the franchise, and he'd basically remake this film twice. Those movies were The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, both of which pretty much ignore the books their titles pull from. Like Spy Who Loved Me, basically just a woman's diary, I'm not joking. And I actually like the book as well. But yeah, he'd cement his name here, but getting that script together wasn't easy. The first draft was by Sidney Bowen, and that went more in line with the book. Now, from a top level view of that, Bond's sent to Japan in order to try and get Japanese intelligence. They've learned that Russia is planning an attack and are going to threaten the UK with nukes. America's probably going to be made aware of it, but they're not too interested in telling us the full message. So Bond basically has to win Tiger round, and over a couple of months he ends up befriending him. In return, Tiger wants a favour from Britain's best assassin. He tells Bond of a castle on the sea where there's a man who sells death. Filled with poisonous plants, this man allows people to come to the island to die. There's definitely elements of the island laced in No Time to Die, including something that happens at the end. Bond recognises the island's owner as Blofeld, and he sets off on a personal mission to kill him. Knowing that if he flagged up who this was to the authorities, they'd come and arrest him for the Thunderball mission, he ends up keeping it quiet. Bond's disguised as a Japanese man and taken to Kissy with her fishing village, allowing him to survey the island. He ends up sneaking there, getting caught before killing Blofeld and escaping. The island then goes up in flames, and Bond's smacked on the head like the like button with some debris. This then gives him amnesia, and he's then saved by Kissy, and basically told that his fake life's the real one. Back home, the character's thought dead, and M even writes his obituary. This is the one they read out in No Time to Die, including this line.
I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use my time.
So you can see how they adapted the end of that into No Time to Die, and Calvin Dyson, bloody Calvin Dyson, I was even talking to him, and he said deep down he hoped there was a post-credit scene where Bond got found on the shore with amnesia, but wasn't to be. I'll talk about the book more in depth later, but the original draft had several of those elements. The second draft was by Harold Jack Bloom, and this was completely missing Blofeld. Instead, it focused on the Black Dragon Gang. They're part of the book, and they're some of Blofeld's hired goons. In that draft, they wanted to take over Tokyo and basically spray the city with fear-inducing gas. So, sort of like a 60s Batman Begins.
The film had a release date. Sean's contract was running out, and we had no script. So the pressure was on everybody, and we lost the writer.
Harold Jack Bloom.
Now, you might notice that the movie was in fact written by Roald Dahl. Yes, the children's author of James and the Giant Peach, Matilda, The Witches, and so on and so forth. He was behind the film.
I've written a lot of stories with sin, not a lot with sex or sadism. I don't think Bond is sadistic at all, really. He's just a tough, rather insensitive fellow who's very good at his job.
Dahl was pretty open about the movies he was a part of though, with him saying most of them were crap. The only film the author liked was this one, with him saying they captured his script perfectly. So Dahl was actually a friend of Fleming, and they'd worked in intelligence in World War II. This was part of the spy ring established by Sir William Stevenson. Under the codename Intrepid, he led several operations. Fleming is even quoted as saying, James Bond is a highly romanticized version of a true spy. The real thing is William Stevenson. David Niven would also play him in a TV show titled A Man Called Intrepid. So Dahl being picked to write a spy thriller based on Fleming's works seemed like the perfect choice. He said the key was having 3 central women in the movie. You'd have an ally that was killed, a henchwoman, and then the main girl that Bond ends up with. So he brought Kissy from the book and then created Branton Aki. Still though, some changes were needed. Finding a castle at sea was impossible because the Japanese weren't stupid and would never build one on the water. You don't build your house on sand or something that can be hit with typhoons or bad weather. So Ken Adams came up with an idea. The book was filled with boiling geysers, oi geyser, and these were used to cook people alive. Now, due to the success of Thunderball, the creative team had a lot more money to play with. That's still one of the highest grossing Bond films ever, and they had $9.5 million for this film. That's up from the $9 million for Thunderball, and way lower than the $3 million that they used for Goldfinger. Because of this, everything's bigger, including the base that we get at the end. According to the wiki, this set alone cost as much as Dr. No's entire budget. Situated inside a dormant volcano, it creates a brand new trend for the franchise. The overblown, criminal base became a staple of the series, and it all starts out here. Beginning with the United Artists logo, this is the first time we'd see it before one of these films. We'd see the logo return throughout the rest of the movies, and it sort of establishes them beyond the independent studio feel that I think the movies had before this one. Cutting to the gun barrel, this time the scene's presented in black and white. Though shot in colour for Thunderball, it was done to give a steely look to the gun barrel itself and make the blood pop more on the screen. I'm not sure how much it works, and obviously they'd go back to colour going forward. This is also the first time I really feel like they try to stylize the music to give a tease of what's coming in the film. To me, that's always felt like it's got a bit of an Eastern feel, and yeah, it's a tease of what's to come. It's here that we get our first major change from the book and see how the creative team was starting to play on what topics were relevant at the time. Barbara Broccoli said that Bond movies exist 5 minutes in the future and they should always be at the cutting edge. So the space race was a big thing, and in 1967 it was really part of the zeitgeist. Politically, it fit well with the tone of the series. The Cold War was of course related to the space race due to the East and West trying to outdo each other. 5 months before the film's release, the world also watched the horror of the Apollo 1 launchpad fire. This saw the death of 3 astronauts and saw NASA suspending manned space rockets for a year. So joining Jupiter 1 and watching the astronauts in peril, like this was really relevant. They even used real footage from the Apollo program throughout the film, which added some authenticity, though NASA didn't want to be credited. We watch as Blofeld's rocket arrives and swallows the US shuttle up like Pac-Man. Just watching the astronaut go floating off into space feels very 2001: A Space Odyssey. William Sylvester actually features in both these films, with him playing an army officer here, and then the part of Dr. Hayward in that. We also meet Shane Rimmer. Guy always plays that guy who does those command center voices, and Nolan even played on this in his Batman movies. We've talked about in these videos how Nolan's a massive Bond fan, and he even had Rimmer as the board control guy in Wayne Tower. Rimmer returned for The Spy Who Loved Me in a larger role, and also featured in Superman 1 and 2.
Hello, Houston. We've lost all radio contact.
That voice sounds familiar. It's because he did work for Captain Scarlet and also the Thunderbirds. That was of course massive in the 60s, and huge shout out to Dutch Bond fan for pointing out how much this intro feels like one of their episodes. Global tensions are flaring up, and we see as the superpowers of the world are blaming each other. In the middle of this is the UK, which is a lot like the books. Because the two countries were often butting heads, it's normally up to Britain to find out the truth and cool things off. I think at the time this would have been a really big political thing though. In the prior movies, they'd switched Smersh to Spectre to avoid the real world complications it could cause. I think doing this though just heightens the stakes. Having Japan involved was a big thing as well. The attack on Pearl Harbor and their involvement in the war was still within recent memory. So them opening up and being allies while we had a focus on the Russians would have been a big thing. Spectre is playing them all low, and they're once more working like that third fish in the tank. Seeing that the spacecraft landed somewhere in Japan, they offer up an agent who's nearby. Cutting to Bond, we get...
Why do Chinese girls taste different from all other girls?
It's one of them movies, mate. Hope it doesn't get any more problematic than this. What do you mean he dresses up as a Japanese man? Phew. Now, the actress Connery's playing against actually returns down the line in a pretty cool way. This is actress Tsai Shin, who plays Madame Wu in Casino Royale. Now, I always wondered what the whole logic behind this entire plan was. Like, to the point, I couldn't really understand it growing up. Like, why do they shoot with real bullets at the bed? Who is in on it? Why are there bullet holes above the bed itself? Why did they need to do it in the first place? Those sorts of questions. How it plays though is that the woman Bond's with is a fellow agent. The men then rush in and shoot the bed, which has an underside of armor plating. I don't know how that explains the bullet holes above it, but yeah, logic goes out the window, mate, in these movies. We're here for a good time, not an actually time. The police then arrive and fake blood's used to give the illusion that Bond is indeed dead. His funeral is then shown, with his death being announced in the papers. They then have an extensive burial at sea where Bond's body's dumped in the water while he's wearing an oxygen tank. A sub then picks him up and he's able to go on with the world thinking that he's dead. Now, why they needed to do all that instead of just putting the story in the papers, no idea, but I applaud them for being so thorough. I feel like my biggest hang-up as a kid was because I felt someone part of the hit couldn't be in on it being staged. Ling's not, and the police feel his pulse, so they aren't either. I did think it might be the gunmen themselves, but they're led in by the agent, so I don't know, but maybe she was hiring them under the guise of it being a paid hit. I don't know. This is one of the movies where I feel like the plot holes really start to appear when you think about it, and I didn't really feel them in the other ones. In the grand scheme of things though, I think the sequence really falls flat and is probably the worst pre-title sequence that they've done. The whole Bond death fake out had been done to death, excuse the pun, and it appeared in From Russia with Love, Thunderball, and now this. However, just when I think they couldn't do anything dumber, they hit the theme song and completely redeem themselves. So, this is probably my favourite soundtrack in the series. Not even being hyperbolic, but a bloody whistle at least about 10 times a day, and have done for many years. I think between this and On Her Majesty's Secret Service that it encapsulates the best of John Barry and the dreamy melodic side to Bond. Whenever I'm driving, you know, in my Aston Martin and thinking that I'm James Bond, you can guarantee I'll put the instrumental on for this. It's a midlife crisis, I admit it. It puts me on the mind to just take a relaxing drive though and enjoy what life brings. I think in spy thrillers, it's very easy to think you just need big bombastic music to carry you through the action scenes. The difference with Bond though is that we have these lifestyle aspects to it that other spy films just don't have. Like, I can't imagine them doing these sorts of things with Bourne or Ethan Hunt, where we're just hanging out with them and watching them enjoy food and drinks, along with a beautiful view and beautiful ladies. It's what Bond is able to do that the others can't, and it's songs like this that help really show that side to him. Doing the vocals is Nancy Sinatra, who steps in after her dad passed on the opportunity. Becoming the first American to sing a Bond song, she was apparently really nervous. It said she ended up doing 25 takes, and they stitched these together from that. This song was also famously sampled on the Robbie Williams song Millennium. Featuring him wearing a tux, the Jetpack, and the DB5, this was his first #1. Topping the charts in September 98, I think this is what a lot of my fellow Brits know the melody from. Maurice Binder also returns for the title sequence. It feels by far his best work at this point, and it teases what's coming in the film. There's the lava from the volcanoes, the Japanese iconography, the geishas, and the cliff sites. This then transitions to Bond's funeral, which is different to how we start the book. Now as for the book, that's actually split into two parts. The first of these is titled It Is Better to Travel Hopefully, with part 2 being called Than to Arrive. We actually begin with Bond in Japan, already with Tiger. Told he's the head of the Japanese Secret Service, we read as the pair play rock, paper, scissors. It's very much Fleming's travelogue style that gives you an insight into the country from the perspective of a Brit. There's Bond drinking sake, getting massages from geishas, and ultimately Bond showing his ability to read people. In the end, Bond wins, and we close out with Tiger deciding to invite him to his house to discuss their dealings. In the West, when you have secrets to discuss, you shut all the doors and windows. In Japan, we throw everything open to make sure that no one can listen at the thin walls. And what I have now to discuss with you is a matter of the very highest secrecy. Jumping back to a month earlier, we see Bond at his lowest point. Throughout both the book and film, there's the constant theme of death and rebirth. That's seen from the off, with it being the death of Bond's career. Blade's Club, that's been closed for a month, and we follow M as he meets Sir Maloney. It's the first time in the books, I think, that we see M without Bond there, and he talks about how the agent's up his game. We learn he's bungled 2 jobs and is a drunken wreck in the wake of his wife's death. So Maloney suggests sending him on an impossible mission, a mission impossible if you will, that will either kill him or invigorate the agent. Called in thinking he's about to get fired, he shows up the next morning completely deflated. His secretary Goodnight sees him as an unshaven drunken mess, and she even ends up straightening his tie, which is a stark contrast to the way we typically see Bond. Goodnight features heavily early on, and she'd make an on-screen appearance in The Man with the Golden Gun. M sits down and he then drops the bombshell, "You're being promoted, 007. Playing dumb that he hasn't noticed he's falling off. He says he's been selected for the biggest job of his career. He's getting £1,000 extra pay and being added to the diplomatic section. Just don't look at the likelihood of survival on the report." In the book, we learn that he's failed the medical, and it's against advice that M still pushes him through. This is something that happens in Skyfall, and I did wonder if this was the inspiration. Bond's actually excited to get another chance though, as he knows a lot of people would have dumped him. He takes Goodnight out for a meal, has a good night, and also spends time with Bill Tanner. Tanner would also become a big part of the films later on, and he's described as being Bond's best mate. Whoa, don't tell Felix, mate. Jumping to a week later, we then get Bond flying out. In the film, we see Bond's funeral and get some Gordon's Gin product placement on the ashtray. From what I read, this was thrown in at the last minute, which is why the guy with the binoculars doesn't really have any importance. I would have loved to have seen, you know, a henchman or something here, but yeah, that's just what you get when you want to throw a quick advert in. And this video is sponsored by Anthony Sinclair, which we'll talk more about in just a bit. According to IMDb trivia though, they shot this in the winter but had everyone on board dressed for the summer. So the extras weren't happy, especially as the body wouldn't sink, so they kept shooting multiple takes. Bond is then picked up by the sub, with this being the first film that didn't feature the MI6 headquarters. Instead, they'd moved their base under the sea and are operating undetected. No idea how long Bond was in the rack for, and I can imagine that you would just shit yourself being down there, but it's all okay. This is also the first time Bond is also seen in his Navy uniform. The uniform returned in The Spy Who Loved Me and also Tomorrow Never Dies. As for M, he's wearing the Rear Admiral shoulder straps. Now with Moneypenny, she's actually donning the uniform of the second officer in the Women's Royal Navy. According to IMDb trivia, these were known as the Wrens, but they disbanded in the 90s when women were allowed into the Navy itself. Beginning with the classic hat throw, Bond also calls Moneypenny Penny.
Hello, Penny.
This is a nickname Fleming gave her in the books, and I was this years old when I realised Penny is also related to money, so Moneypenny. Nothing gets past us. Bond is then fired out the torpedo tube wearing a scuba suit, and I also felt like this influenced the opening of Metal Gear Solid. Sneaking to the shore, he's arrived in Japan. Taking us to Tokyo, you just hit with a wave of colour from the neon signs. Everything lights up, and it really brings the city to life. We then join Bond as he goes to some sumo wrestling. I don't think we've ever seen this many people in a Bond movie before, and the audience all showed up for free. Bond was massive in Japan, and they put out signs saying they were making a movie, so a ton of people turned up. However, from the behind the scenes stories, it sounds like Connery had a very miserable time. He was mobbed in the street, and people even followed him in the toilet to take photos, and the guy's just like, I'm having a shit. I'm having a shirt. Having a shirt. Pushed my pants. When he was in shooting scenes though, he had to answer questions from the press and constantly had a camera shoved in his face, both on screen and off. Apparently he showed up to an interview wearing normal clothes, and the guy there actually kicked off because, and I quote, "That's not what James Bond dresses like." Connery had to explain that he wasn't James Bond, which is crazy. To make things worse though, the marketing at the time that had all the posters saying Sean Connery is James Bond, and you can see why people expected him to be a certain way. As we touched upon earlier, this is also where things strained with the producers, as he felt like he'd made Bond this massive thing. He wasn't really getting paid extra for it though, and it was holding him back from higher paying jobs in films. I'm a fan, so like I can't ever imagine being sick of playing James Bond, but like putting myself in the headspace, I'm trying to think what it would be like if I had to play the main character in Avatar or something. I think Avatar's alright, you know, but if there was crazy fans chasing me down all the time, I think I'd get a bit bothered. I'm not in the Na'vi, I'm not blue. You have people who want you to constantly keep playing the same character though, and we'll no doubt discuss with a lot of actors how by the third film, or even the second, they tend to be a bit fed up. But on the flip side of this, I can also see, you know, turning up as Bond, being part of the job and what you signed up for. Now, if you'd like to dress like Bond, then definitely check out our partners Anthony Sinclair. They're currently doing the 6 Decades of Bond collection, and I'm picking up a new suit every single video from them. Though we've been primarily going through Connery's, I also got this one that's a reproduction of Daniel Craig's in No Time to Die. The level of detail on these is absolutely insane, and I didn't even realize when watching the movie it was a 3-button suit until they sent it out. Embarrassingly, I hit up the tailor like, this is 3 buttons. And he sent me a picture back showing that the suit in the movie is indeed 3 buttons, and yeah, made me look stupid, but that's the level of accuracy that they're doing. They're the best suits I've ever worn by far, and if you want to pick one up, then please use our affiliate link below or mention us to Elliot, and it just helps us out massively. Going to the sumo fight, we then see a big section in the book where Tiger explains something I hadn't heard before. He says in the book that when they're growing up, they massage their testicles so they can ascend back up into their body and do this before preparing for a fight. Tiger says how they should teach agents that, as it's like the one thing that's held to ransom during interrogation. And yeah, I can't help but think Bond remembers his time in the chair in Casino Royale. Either way, I'll love the password here as well. It kinda sets the stage for what's gonna happen, and Aki's the standout in the movie for me. Completely brand new for the film, there's a pretty insane behind the scenes story about her and Kissy. When crafting the film, the Japanese government, they said they'd let them shoot it, but they had a couple of conditions. They'd only grant permits to the film if they hired 2 Japanese actresses. The production team were more than happy with this though, since Kissy was such a big part of the book. Going to Toho Studios, they'd carved their names in history with the Godzilla films. Thus, they suggested their studio mainstays, which I'm about to butcher, Miyahama and Akiko Wakabayashi. The pair had starred in King Kong vs. Godzilla and also What's Up Tiger Lily. That was pretty much an imitation of James Bond, and it starred Woody Allen in the lead, who just so happened to play a version of Bond in Casino Royale. So the pair seemed like a natural fit, but there came a bit of a snag. Neither could speak English, so the pair were sent to England to study it. Wakabayashi was cast as Kissy, whereas Hama was selected as Aki. Unfortunately, Hama had difficulty learning the lines, and thus the producers started looking at other actresses. The plan was to take her out for dinner, say you're not speaking English that well, and then just let her down gently. Straightforward, right? Well, not really. Hama said she'd throw herself off the top of the Dorchester if they fired her. What? Obviously, Cubby and Harry Saltzman didn't want to test this, so in the end they had the actresses swap parts, and she played Kissy, which had a lot less lines. But they dubbed her anyway, with series mainstay Nikki Van der Zyl, which is why she sounds exactly like Honey Rider. Also, turns out she couldn't swim either, and Connery's wife, Diane Keilento, doubled her, which you can definitely see when they're swimming. Keilento, I'm not good at pronouncing stuff, I'm not even good at saying pronouncing, so I'm definitely butchering all these names. Going to Aki's car, this is the Toyota 2000 GT, which actually wasn't a convertible. Connery was too tall to sit in it though, so they ended up chopping off the roof. You can kind of see this as he rides by, as he clearly doesn't fit in it. Produced in limited numbers over 3 years, they just made 350 of them. These were at the top of the range though, with one coming third in the Japanese Grand Prix while winning the Fuji 24-hour race in the same year as the movie. Now, whereas Hama couldn't learn the lines, Akiko wasn't able to drive, so they ended up pulling the car via cable, with stuntmen wearing black wigs in the wider shots. 2 of the cars also had their roofs cut for the movie, with one now existing in the Toyota headquarters. The other belongs to a Toyota executive, making it the rarest of all the Bond cars in the wild. Daniel Craig though has said this is his favourite ride from the franchise. Riding out to Dicko, this is a character that comes from the book. Based on Richard Hughes, he had a large career in the East during the war. Hughes began life as a war correspondent and went to Tokyo in 1940. He actually warned that Japan was likely to enter the war and try to raise the flag on what was happening in the country. After the war, he moved on to Hong Kong, where he then worked as a journalist. However, between you and me, it's also thought that he might have spied on the country for Britain, basically making him a double agent. Hughes not only inspired Dicko, but John le Carré also based Old Crow on him in The Honourable Schoolboy. According to the stories, Fleming joined up with Hughes during a 2-week trip to Japan so he could do research for the book. The pair also worked alongside Tiger Saito, who was the basis for Tiger Tanaka. In the book, we learn he's been there for 10 years, whereas in the film, it's actually been 28. Obviously, the book and film were written in different decades, so they adjusted to that. Either way though, he still isn't used to the culture.
Oh, you must excuse this rather odd mixture of styles.
In the book, he talks about how the clocks, taps and toilet water all go the opposite way and is sort of a down-to-earth view of the country. He's Australian as well. The head of Station J, he acts as a middleman who introduces Bond to Tiger. He kind of shows the shaky allegiances and even realizes that Tanaka's men's got them mic'd at one point. He also spots people at a bar who wear the suits Tanaka's agents tend to wear. So he's pretty annoyed he's constantly being followed. It's sort of like Karen Bay in Russia, but the two sides have a more friendly manner. In the movie, they have people constantly watching from all walks of life, and I love the paranoia that it adds. In the book, we don't really hear much about Dicko until Bond heads off, though he does return at the end. Kissy talks about how he turns up at the village asking questions, and she has to play dumb that Bond was never found. This isn't the fate he gets in the film though, and I love this death scene.
A large Japanese industrial concern.
Just the way he stops mid-sentence, it's brilliant. For a second, you're confused, and it even crossed my mind that the TV might be broken. I don't think getting stabbed would stop you mid-sentence like that in real life, but for a film, it just works so well. Played by Charles Gray, Gray himself would return as Blofeld down the line. As he comes in, Bond enters Ever the Spy, and firstly knocks his leg as a way to check that it's false. We also have him giving Bond a...
Oh, that's stirred, not shaken. That was right, wasn't it?
What? Perfect.
Which Bond accepts, but yeah, you can see he's being polite, and it's supposed to be shaken, not stirred, mate. Supposed to be shaken, not stirred. Dicko, you fake fan! Normally this kind of scene would just be a massive exposition dump, but I love how it just keeps the pace and goes right back to the action. It's a really creative way to play with our expectations and one of the better character deaths in these first 5 films. Bond then catches up with the assassin and feigns being wounded to sneak into the pickup. Taken to the Asotto building, he reveals himself in a manner that's similar to Bond in The World Is Not Enough. There they flipped it though, with Bond taking Davidov's disguise. Raz here, he's revealing who he is. Bond also immediately shot Davidov, which he might have learned from what happens here. It's a little bit more difficult. Now, if this guy looks familiar, that's because he's played by professional wrestler Peter Maivia, who was also known in the ring as the High Chief. Hailing from Samoa, why I'm saying he might look familiar is you may have heard of his grandson, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Yep, once you see it, can see the family resemblance. Really cool watching this back though, and thinking about how his family would not only follow in his footsteps in wrestling, but also in the movie business. Fighting him, we see another one of Ken Adams' expansive sets. Throw the couch at him! I love how in it they reveal a safe and then Bond spots it when getting a drink. Busting out his state-of-the-art safecracker, I imagine this was state-of-the-art at the time. There's lots of things online about how it was impressive due to being the size of a matchbox, but these days it's kind of commonplace in a lot of movies. I think it's quite quaint, along with how Bond escapes from the guards. Obviously, as the series went on, you know, his escapes got bigger and bombastic to the point he's like driving a motorbike off a cliff just to catch it with a plane that doesn't have a pilot. But seeing him just hide behind this filing cabinet and then quickly run out, yeah, it's great. Shot at as he leaves the building, he's then picked up by Aki, taking him to a subway station. It's here that we get to meet Tiger. In the book, this goes down in chapter 5, which is titled The Magic 44. I love this slide in the movie though, and it's much more elaborate. In the book, he gets taken to a room which is then revealed to be an elevator. Nolan may also have borrowed this from The Dark Knight Rises, as it reminds me a lot of the entrance to the fusion reactor. Upon entering, Tiger says,
"It is a great pleasure to meet you at last."
Voiced by Robert Rietti, he's performed a lot of dubbing in the film so far.
Magnificent creatures.
Now in the book, we learn more about the station. Discovering it'll take 10 years to finish the subway, they've got a lot of time to run their operations. Plus, Tiger says it's cheaper than office space in Tokyo. Tiger, in the book though, he's quite a remorseful character, and he talks about the folly of war. He even says how stupid Pearl Harbor was. To him, the Japanese could never have conquered America anyway, and it was just asking for an impossible war. He even remarks they could have invaded Britain had they not bullishly done that. Bond quickly shuts it down though and says to save that for future historians as he's focused on what's coming. Tanaka then replies, "We have a saying, speak of next year and the devil laughs," which is actually something I say a lot actually in real life after reading it. They then talk about the nukes and even discuss how Russia's planning to hit Newcastle, which is where I was born. So yeah, I really connected with this introduction. In the book, there's people who actually want this to happen though, as another big nuke will force disarmament. So this will guarantee peace in the long run. So he says it might even be in America's best interest to pass on a garbled warning that doesn't really prepare us. Which bloody hell, America, I thought we were mates. Tanaka is clearly playing politics as well though, as he wants an ally in the UK. We discover that he feels a lot of shame about how he was involved with the war. Turns out that he came over here to study and said all the people treated him well. However, he reveals he was actually a spy and feels a sense of debt to us. Seeing himself as a pawn in a fruitless war, this to him is what's gonna make it right. So he's a great character. An interesting aspect as well is that we learn Tiger signed up to be a kamikaze pilot. He talks about it from the perspective of a soldier at the time, which is something you never really get to hear. Saying that they wore headbands with samurai symbols, they ran to their planes as if embracing their ancestors. He sees it as a point of pride because it shows how much people love their country. Bond, on the other hand, just sees it as a shame that Japan lost so many of its young men. This kind of dropped in a time where Japan was starting to open itself up to the West, and this is probably why Bond was such a big thing there in the first place. On the flip side of this, the West was also starting to open itself up to Japan, so it's brilliant reading this camaraderie reflected in the characters. Born in the era of the Tiger, Tanaka talks about the differences between East and West. He sees us as having a life centered around flashy cars and earning a quick buck, often dishonestly. He thinks that life's being sold in Japan, but Bond retorts about how the West sees the East as being an attractive thing too. They go into the simplicity of life there and how they honour their elders. I think this is Fleming, probably flexing some of the conversations that he likely had when he was out there, and it adds some real cultural aspects to the book. Now, though the movie has the events playing out in less than a week, the book has a month passing. There's a line that says, Bond's become Bondo-san, and clearly there's a great friendship forming. During this time, JFK gives his strongest speech about atomic weapons and how any use by Russia will be seen as an act of war. That's met with the same response, and thus tensions de-escalate. That point then kind of takes a back foot, and Bond tells us about a man on the island. Known as the Collector of Death, the story then switches to hunting him down. This then goes into Bond and Tiger riding a train, which is where we go next in the film. This is owned by Japanese intelligence in the movie though. I think the film just ties it together much better with the safe documents revealing several things. This includes a boat, a microdot, and lots of things that foreshadow what's coming. For the night though, Bond stays at Tiger's place just like the book.
In Japan, men always come first, women come second.
Or sometimes not at all.
Which, look, yeah, I'm sure it's the most played out Bond joke in existence, but too good not to mention. One of the women here is also played by Jeanne Rowland, who actually starred in Casino Royale just a couple of months prior.
She's very sexyful.
It's here that we also hear Tetsuro Tanabe's real voice, minus the dubbing. Aki then arrives, and finally she and Bond get some time together. The next day, Bond returns to Asado under the cover of a businessman. I love how you can see the statue here that he just smashed before as well. It's here that we meet not only Asado, but also Helga Brandt. Red-headed, femme fatale, she's clearly based on Fiona Volpe from Thunderball. I think that's especially seen in her hair, as Karen Dorr was actually a brunette in real life. Her hair does look pretty dyed, and yeah, it's clearly just done it because Volpe was so loved. Because Dorr looks great as a brunette too, so yeah, changing that, just we love Fiona. Later on, we also meet the blonde henchman Hans. Clearly modelled after Ed Grant, he also falls short of what came before. All these characters are brand new for the movie, and I think Dahl was just trying to do what was already successful. I also feel like Osada kinda lays the groundwork for High Fat and the Man with the Golden Gun. Both are multimillionaire businessmen that figure out who Bond is. Both also get killed by the bad guy to highlight just how big of a threat they are. Asada is Japanese though, whereas High Fat's from Thailand, so maybe I'm racist. Anyway, we see as The Rock's granddaddy's body's been shifted from the safe, and thus there's been a cover-up. I love how this scene's a sort of repeat of the night before, but handled in a totally different way. That was about brawns, whereas this is two sides trying to outdo each other intellectually, even using X-rays. It still ends the same way though, with Bond being shot outside before he's rescued by Aki. Leading to a car chase, we see another big stunt for the time with the chopper using a magnet to pick up a car. This then dumps it in the water, which Bond watches from a TV inside the car. It's super high tech, even though like I don't know who's up there filming this helicopter stuff, but Turn your brain off. We then get Target doing a video call at the car, which would then be parodied with Basil exposition, asking him to
Tell him to send little Nellie. Repeat, little Nellie. Suggest she be accompanied by her father.
This sets up the appearance of Q. It's here that they then continue to the docks. Taking us to the Ningpo, this confirms it's carrying the rocket fuel needed for Blofeld's operation. It's purely just to give us an action scene, but I actually really like where it goes. I love the aerial shot on the roof, which has Bond fighting across it. Just feels like a step up in terms of what we've seen before, and is the camera crew just flexing their muscles. We also get one of the best examples of a Texas switch. In this moment, Bob Simmons jumps off the second level and lands on a pile of boxes. He then rolls off and Connery runs out, which makes it seem like he's doing it all. Really simple but effective switch, and something that just keeps the action rolling. However, even with that, Bond's caught and then put on board the boat. This is where he's interrogated, or should I say, wakes up covered in vagina, because Helga Brandt, she's all over him. The pair get it on, and yeah, I really don't know what the point in this is, because like the next scene, she tries to kill him.
All the things I do for England.
She just kind of goes with it that they're gonna escape, and then the pair take to the air. Dropping an explosive, she then locks him in place with a table and jumps out the plane. He then gets out of that with a judo chop and does an emergency landing. It's a lot of effort to go to kill someone, especially when you had them tied up the day before, but yeah, just part and parcel of these movies, mate. That's why we love them. Reunited with Aki, we see the cheekier side of Bond.
You wouldn't. That's a horrible girl. You wouldn't, would you?
Oh, heaven forbid.
You son of a bitch, Bond. It's here that Bond then plays Spot the Difference with the ships. Realizing one's loaded up while the other photo isn't, they've clearly dropped the cargo somewhere. This leads us into our Q scene, and we also get the arrival of Little Nellie, piloted by Ken Wallace, that actually plays into the craft's name. In the war, if your name was Wallace, you got called Nellie after Nellie Wallace. Hence the name Little Nellie. Huge shout out to Dutch Bond fan for pointing out that this is what Little Willie in Grand Theft Auto was based on. This is easily the most famous gyrocopter in the world though, and he was an expert at flying it. They even asked him to turn against the runway because the sun was in the sky in a way where it wasn't properly lit. So the camera crew swapped sides, and though it was dangerous, he still managed to do it. Spending 85 hours in the air, overall they got some really great shots. I love seeing everything from the skies, and it's awesome watching the little yellow copter gliding through the air. Nellie the little helicopter. However, as is with a lot of these movies, there were some serious accidents. The James Bond archive says John Jordan had a rotor sliced through his leg, and this was so bad they had to amputate it. Kirby and Harry apparently treated him like royalty though, and helped him in whatever way they could. He even ended up with a fake leg, which was ironic as Dicko has one in the movie. Jordan later did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for them, and it sounds like there wasn't any bad blood. The quote from the book, it says Jordan just wanted to keep flying. We then watch as Bond scouts the area and even flies over the volcano and looks at the water base. I feel like this massively inspired the scene in GoldenEye where Bond and Natalia go looking for the second dish. That too was hidden by water, and both scenes have the baddies shooting them out the sky. Or at least trying to, as is the case with Little Nellie. Leads to a crazy aerial battle though where Nellie shows the extent of her gadgets. There's rockets, machine guns, and even cute little parachuting mines. Yay! Lastly, we have the rear flamethrower, and it's a cracking scene. Now the space race hasn't stopped because of Bond, and we see the Russians launch their rocket. Once more it's Pac-Man, which makes tensions escalate. However, we get more of this scene this time. This includes the Spectre rocket doing a vertical landing. This wasn't actually achieved in real life until SpaceX pulled it off in 2013. It highlights how cutting edge that Spectre is though, and we get to see the volcano landing base. Everything was done for real here, including the sliding roof and monorail, giving us once more a look at the man with the cat. This gives us the showdown between Bond and his big bad. Now, throughout the breakdown so far, we've talked about how Mike Myers, he kinda ruined Blofeld for me. Little bit of insight for you, mate, but we're filming all these bits on the same day, so if you guys have been kicking off saying, I keep mentioning it, I haven't seen those comments. However, I can imagine there's people who just want me to accept Pleasance's performance without the parody destroying what he's going for.
No way! Way to go, a-hole!
To his credit, this is the quintessential Blofeld, and no other actor would live up to it.
Right.
Just like Bond, Blofeld was recast over the years, and while people argue over who the best Bond was, I think everyone can agree that Pleasance was the
author of all your pain.
I think when you're looking at why something was picked to parody, you also have to understand why they picked this performance. Pleasance is rather unpleasant in a way, and the other actors just don't live up to it.
He has mojo.
Blofeld is creepy and almost Gollum-like, with him being like a creature rather than a man. Obviously, we've had him teased throughout the franchise, so they had to do something big and unnerving. Blofeld had to be more than just a man, and I feel that's something they pull off. Villains down the line would obviously take from him, with Emperor Palpatine clearly cribbing from him as well. There's also a weirdly kind and comforting side as well, as he's sitting there stroking a cat. So you have this weird duplicity with him, clearly being able to love Mr. Bigglesworth.
Come, Mr. Bigglesworth!
Now, in order to add to the performance, Pleasance did a number of key things. The first was that he wouldn't blink at all, which meant that his scarred eyes were constantly fixated on someone. Often, he'll stare directly into the camera, and it really adds to the creepiness. And the name Blofeld was adopted from a friend of Fleming's at Eton who was named Thomas Blofeld. He also dated the character's date of birth as his own, with that being May 28th, 1908. If you watched our Thunderbolt breakdown, you'll also know he talked about Ernest Cuneo. Not sure if you can see this, but he's a very close friend of Fleming, and he actually dedicated the book to him. So Fleming clearly brought together lots of different influences from his life.
You only live twice, Mr. Bond.
Philip Gardner also noticed a really interesting bit of trivia in his book, The Bond Code. There he pointed out that Ernst is a play on Ernest, and Stavros is Greek for Victor. This makes him the Ernest Victor, but the analysis goes beyond that. Blofeld means blue field, which Gardner chalked up as being Fleming swiping at his own blue blood rampant in the field. He stated that, as the creator of Spectre, Blofeld in reality is Fleming, with the figure looming forever present in his divided mind, which is a quote I love. So yeah, even had Griffin, who edited that section, he texts me saying, I'm going to get so much shit for saying Pleasance was the best, but I'm sticking by it for now. We'll see if I go back on it for on Her Majesty's Secret Service, but for now, I'm sticking for it. Landing in the base, we then see Adam's set, and he said you kind of want these to be asymmetrical so they don't look boring to the eye. Hence the sort of curved down slant that it has. It's here that we learn how Blofeld's been working with the Japanese government, and though things have been going smoothly, he wants more money.
This is extortion.
Yeah, mate, that's what Spectre stands for.
Spectre, Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, Extortion.
Ah, extortion, yeah. So sort of in the name there. Blofeld wants $100 million, but like, I don't know if that even covers the cost of the rocket, let alone hollowing out an active volcano.
Do you know what gun this is?
Walther PPK.
Which I feel gets played off in GoldenEye.
Walther PPK. 7.65mm. Only 3 men I know use such a gun.
But he wants more shows he won't tolerate failure and brutally dispatches Brandt. Dor did this stunt herself and was pretty proud of volunteering to go down the slide. The piranhas actually pull from the buck, and we learn they're one of the delights of Blofeld's castle. And you have of course heard of the South American piranha fish. They can strip a whole horse to the bone in less than an hour. Speaking of castles, we then jump to the ninja training grounds at Himeji Castle in Japan. First established in 1333, it's been the home of several warlords. It's here that we see a ninja demonstration, which somewhat pulls from the book. There Tiger has them carrying out a demo in which they show how they defend the grounds if attacked. Involves them mounting the walls, moats, scaling the fort, and just basically all getting into place. A student actually dies during this, which Bond feels pretty bad about. However, Tiger says he was the weakest link, and thus it's better he died here than the castle was stormed and they all died together. It's here that they then walk us through the history of the ninja, which would have been relatively new to the West. The Now Playing podcast even researched and found out that this was the first Western movie to feature the ninja. You will see men walk across the surface of water, walk up walls and across ceilings, and you will be shown equipment which makes it possible for them to remain submerged underwater for a full day. It really adds to their mystique, and he goes through how they're trained to kill without weapons. None of his men carry guns, and thus if they're questioned, they won't be thought of as guilty. They have tools that can be turned lethal, but the ninja is all about stealth and deception. Taken to a museum, Tiger then shows Bond the weapons and tools that have been used throughout the wars. They actually have a couple that appeared in the earlier movies as well. At the time of writing this, Dr. No had just been released, and thus they were working in tandem. Bond sees a bamboo shoot that he's told is used to breathe underwater, and he recalls doing something similar on a Caribbean island. Bond also sees a cyanide pistol, which is said it can make someone seem like they died of a heart attack. That's something they used in Thunderball, and yeah, brought that across to this. You can tell Fleming respects the hell out of the country though, and he even talks about, well, through Tiger, how every country has their own legendary figures. For us Brits, it's the knights in shining armor, and the Americans have their cowboys. The Japanese is the samurai in ninjutsu, and that's what Bond's working with. Now the creative team, they actually ended up enlisting Japan's only practicing ninja, a man named Masaki Hatsumi. He actually appeared as a cameo on the train and interrupts Tiger and Bond when they talk about the sake. The team also had an insane brush with death as well. They had a flight for Hong Kong to London but missed it due to watching the combat demonstrations. That flight ended up crashing 25 minutes in and it killed everyone on board. We also see a guy practicing with a sword against several opponents. You might notice he returns at the volcano and even pulls off similar moves to what he does here. We then see Tiger taking Bond through what's basically the Japanese version of Q-Labs. There's lots of gadgets, including an explosive cigarette that fires rockets. According to IMDb trivia, these were real-life weapons that were given to the team as part of their product placement. Much in the same way, the military inquired about the rebreather last time. You know, the one who wanna make us talk Scottish. They hoped that this would get them some contracts. However, ammo cost twice as much as a regular bullet, and they were extremely inaccurate past 10 yards. So they ceased production just 2 years later. In the book, we then go to the chapter Instant Japan.
But first, you must become Japanese.
At this point, Bond's made into a Japanese man, which...
Gombawa.
Konbanwa.
Yeah, a bit bad, but it did kind of set the stage for when they did the reverse of it in Die Another Day, hey? Looking at the film and the time it was released, they obviously didn't have the identity politics we have today. You obviously couldn't make it now, but I'm actually surprised that they went with it in the movie. There's not really much of a point to it, as Bond's cover's blown instantly. Several assassins come after him at the camp, and by the time we get to the third act, the disguise is completely gone. So it's not like he ever needed it, and yeah, I feel like they could have easily cut it from the script. They were clearly trying new things though, with this being the first film Bond didn't wear a tux for. This scene would also massively be parodied in Team America, and it's hard not to think about it when watching it back. Like, the room is exactly the same.
It's uncanny.
But yeah, they go through all this work, and then he has 2 assassination attempts within 24 hours. So it didn't work at all. That night he gets in bed with Aki, and the first of the hitmen arrive. This was based on a tale from the 16th century in which a ninja attempted to assassinate Oda Nobunaga. Similar to lowering poison through the ceiling, this attempt failed when Oda woke up. However, in the film it catches Aki, which I think is a big shame. I find her much more interesting than Kissy, and wish they'd kept her around for the whole thing. Not like Bond is Oz though, and the next day the guy's just back on his feet, sparring and planning his wedding. According to the wiki, Barbara Broccoli ended up catching a fever from sleeping on the floor, and she was around 6 at the time of shooting this, and it's kinda crazy thinking how much she was involved in these films at such a young age. Connery apparently lent her her bed, and didn't know when else to drop this in the breakdown, so yeah, there's a sleeping scene where they lie on the floor, and drop it in here. Now the book handles things totally differently, and we catch Bond and Tiger boarding a train. Tiger constantly tests him and says he also has to act Japanese as well. Things like blowing your nose as silently as possible and maneuvering around old people, you have to show them respect. He also says there's no swear words in Japanese, which I'm not sure if that's true, but interesting tidbit. Here though, yeah, a 6'2" Scottish looking guy, not fooling anyone. Now in the book, they say he's got a card that states he's deaf and dumb. It kind of plays like the one from Joker, I imagine in my head, and if anyone talks to him, he just hands that over. Tiger even says people might show pity and then give him some coins. Upon boarding the train, Bond then spots someone suspicious, and later this same man tries to kill him. Upon defeating him, they find the Black Dragon tattoo and know that Blofeld's watching them closely. Bond and Tiger then visit an old whorehouse, which is now a museum. Described as being a place of rest and recreation, we hear how food was served and stories were told through the night. It wasn't just going in to bang, they had a great cultural time. Here Tiger talks of their poets, and he gets Bond to write a haiku. This is, you only live twice, once when you're born, once when you look death in the face. Tiger loves it, and Bond hopes that when it comes to getting his second life after staring down death, that he embraces this opportunity. This foreshadows the death he looks in the face with Blofeld, and then the second life he gets as an amnesiac at the fishing village. They also get blowfish at a restaurant, and though it's extremely dangerous and deadly, Bond still orders it. This was obviously, back in the 50s as well, when that dish wasn't that widely known, though it's been on The Simpsons and stuff. So yeah, great travelogue for the time. In it, they go through the poisons, and I couldn't help but feeling it was playing into Blofeld's island, especially as this is the last meal before the real mission begins. In the movie, we then see as Bond's a bit gutted, he's probably gonna have to marry a Minga.
You will be a poor Japanese worker with humble Japanese wife at your side.
Yeah, with a face like a pig.
Hey mate, Aki's just died, yeah? Be a bit more respectful. The lineup of women though, and his expressions, they're not going to do anything for his sexist, misogynist dinosaur reputation, but it's through this that he meets Kissy. Part of the Shinto religion in the book, the priest clears Bond living at their village and he's integrated into Kissy's family. This then sort of plays into the movie, and it's the fishing village we see him travelling to next. In the book, Tiger tells him a joke about a woman crossing a bridge who only pays half the toll. The god shouts at her, but she says she's only going to go halfway across and then throw herself into the river. Tiger, yeah, he's loving it. He bursts out laughing, but I don't know if it's that funny, mate. I wouldn't open with it. Thematically, though, it plays into the ending as though Bond gets there and completes the mission, he doesn't return home. Tiger even gives Bond a cyanide pill, but he turns it down, saying, "You only live twice." He says he'll accept his second life in whatever form it takes and seems more optimistic after all the tragedy. In the movie, we then see a funeral proceeding through the village and learn of the death at the cave, which is thought to be a bad omen. Bond also pushes away some oysters.
Well, I won't need these.
They're an aphrodisiac, but he's being told they're sleeping in separate rooms, so sorry, not bothering. At the village, the priest then talks about how the castle is a place of evil where the devil lives. They call Bond Taro, as that means thunder. The book then delves into the Shinto religion, and Kissy takes Bond to a shrine of statues, known as the Six Guardians. Bond visits them in the chapter One Golden Day. It's the calm before the storm, in which he has these quote-unquote stolen days. Bond sees these as the days he doesn't deserve, in which he gets to experience the best of life while on the job. It's a really happy time for him, in which he gets to make the most of life. In an area opposite of the fortress, Kissy shows him the Guardians and talks about the prophecy. It's said that hell opened up on the island and that one day a man will come and slay the King of Death. Bond doesn't make much of it, but after Kissy gives an offering to the statues, he questions whether he saw them nod. Kissy even asks if he saw them do it, but he just brushes it to the side. In the movie, that night we hear the Americans are launching another rocket. If anything happens, they'll declare war! Dun dun dun! Always kills me how they can see the ship coming in to gobble theirs up later, but they're polite enough to see if it definitely happens before doing anything. Hey, I suppose the Cuban Missile Crisis did a similar thing a couple of years earlier, but it's just funny thinking they had to actually wait until it happened before declaring war in the end. Either way, Kissy leads Bond to a cave. Discovering there's a poisonous gas, the pair leap into the water. This somewhat plays off the book, and there we learn the castle has volcanic vents attached to it that unleash poisonous gases. I can't help but think that doll might have adapted that, but either way, it leads to an invisible layer of protection to the island. In the book, Bond also uses a long lens to confirm it's Blofeld. Seeing it as an ancient feud, it's now time to settle the score. In the film, they realise the cave vents lead to the volcano and make their way on foot. Noticing a helicopter flying in, I love the scene where Bond throws a rock and it just clangs against the fake water.
It's metal.
Always stuck with me that. Bond then decides to head in and he tells Kissy to make her way all the way back to Tiger in the middle of the night. The entire journey that took us all day without any food or water. Good luck. Like, even as they got there, she was like,
"May I rest a moment?"
"No, you can't. Run and swim back the entire way." Honestly, I'd rather do what Bond does and we see him scale the interior. I love seeing the suction cup knee pads he has, and it's great seeing Bond adapt some of them ninja-like skills. Riding to the astronauts, it's actually mental to think they built an entire monorail just for a movie set. Bond then frees the captured astronauts, and we get a sort of reverse of the Goldfinger Sal scene where he sticks his face in the peephole. We also get a nice sort of riff off the guard scene before where Bond hides in the corner. Say what you want about Bond, yeah, but he's great at hiding out the way of guards and letting them run past him. Bond then takes the place of an astronaut to sneak on board the shuttle. I know I look old as shit, yeah, but I grew up in a time where Moonraker was already out there, but I always thought of this as sort of being sort of a tease to that. Sort of like Cap moving Mjolnir slightly in Age of Ultron. No idea what his plan was when he was up there, and considering Blofeld was going to blow it up with a captured shuttle on board to start the war, Yep, made a lucky escape. In the control room, we also get a better look at Bert Kwok. I mentioned Kwok in our Goldfinger breakdown as he played Mr. Ling there. Guy was a mainstay on Harry Hill, and my dad used to absolutely love pointing him out in the Bond films. He was actually also in the Casino Royale the same year and constantly popping up in the back of these movies. We then get the reveal of Blofeld, which often gets ripped apart because he appears from behind a dude's crotch. It's a weird reveal, I'll admit that, but to be honest, I never really was concentrating on the dude. It's more the lean forward that draws you in. But yeah, they could have had him spin around in the chair or something and achieve the same goal. Calvin Dyson said on his review that he'd love to have seen the audience reactions in the 60s, and I couldn't agree more. It's just something really creepy about him, and he's the perfect opposite to Bond.
You only live twice, Mr. Bond.
Initially, Pleasance tried lots of different looks, which included a hunchback. I think the eye is the best way to go with it though, and it just makes him seem like he has a skewed view of the world. Now, Pleasance was actually brought in last minute, and initially they shot 5 days with Jan Werrick. He just wasn't seen as being menacing enough though, with some sources saying he played Blofeld like he was Santa Claus. So they went the opposite direction with Pleasance and had like this creepy Gollum type figure. The cat was apparently a nightmare to film with, and you can see it constantly panicking. Like, there's a bit where it's just clawing at Blofeld's arm and he's having to hold it to not break the scene, but it's going mental. There was a point they set off an explosion and it scared it to the point that it shat on Pleasance. It then ran off and couldn't be found for several days, and the owner even tried to sue the producers. He said it was so scared of film sets it refused to do another commercial. And Bond basically ruined another pussy, you could say. Hey. Nah, but Bond disrupts all Blofeld's plans using the cigarettes, and all hell breaks loose as Tiger's men arrive. It definitely feels like it became the formula to have an army arriving at the end, and we'd seen that in Goldfinger, Thunderball, and now this. Though they did kind of move away from it in later entries. Bond also goes toe-to-toe with Hans and chucks him in the pool of piranhas. This sort of riffs off a death Bond sees in the book, and it happens when he's hiding on the island. Finding a shed, he lays low and watches the patrols to plan out his moves. It's here he witnesses the horrors of the night and watches a man stumbling about in pain. Stung to the point his face looks like it's covered in shrubs, he sees him dazed and reaching out his hand, almost as if it's to a loved one. Falling into the water, Bond then watches as he's torn apart by the fish. Bond also sees a man burned to death by a geezer. He thinks the Japanese Air Force should just come and bomb the place, which may have inspired the ending of No Time to Die. Finally, Blofeld comes to survey the land, and Bond makes his move in the night. However, as he sneaks into the castle, there's a false floor that he falls through, which may have actually inspired the one before when he was meeting Tiger. Caught by Bunt and Blofeld, they find his card that says he's deaf and dumb. Bunt immediately recognizes him, but Blofeld's not so sure. In the movie, they just completely drop his disguise, and I think it's completely gone by the time he hides as the astronaut. So yeah, completely pointless disguise. In the book though, it has a bit more usage. Blofeld takes him to a room with a geezer in the floor and tells him which spot in the corner is safe. If he is deaf and dumb, he'll not hear this, but if he's Bond, he'll move over and wait there. Which he does. Finally rumbled, Bond just says, "Well, Blofeld, you mad bastard." Bond then gets escorted out, and he has a final cigarette with his enemy, which also kind of plays into Blofeld giving him one as well. This one isn't loaded with a rocket though, and thus he prepares Bond for execution. He goes over all his plans and says the Thunderball mission was kind of just like a boy finding something and offering it back for money. Just a more dramatic version. One of the big worries in the book was that if people kept stealing nukes and holding the world to ransom, then eventually the world would just fall apart. He actually thinks in the end we would have got disarmament, and overall he'd have created a better world. Nutter! Seeing himself as a modern day samurai, he wants to get Bond on his knees and behead him. When he goes to do this though, Bond dives out the way and bests him before strangling him and saying, "Die, Blofeld, die!" In the book, Blofeld then dies at his hands, whereas in the film there he of course died because of the nanobites thing. Bond is actually just knocked out, and there are theories that she is still alive out there. I've not actually read any of the books beyond Fleming's run, but if she pops up in the other ones, yeah, drop it below. The place interrupts and Bond makes his escape, which is when he's knocked unconscious. For the movie, it's Blofeld who gets away though. For some reason, he decides to shoot Osada instead of Bond, and then leads Bond away for about 10 seconds to then go and shoot him anyway. Luckily though, this gives Tiger a view of his hand so he can get him with a shuriken. I think in hindsight, yeah, They probably should have killed Blofeld here. When we look at everything as one big cohesive narrative. Obviously they knew this was the last film in Connery's contract, and this is the bad guy he's been fighting all along. I know these days it's trendy to do the whole villain working in the shadows, like, it was me the whole time from the shadows. When yeah, a lot of the time they've had nothing to do with it. Looking at you, Blofeld Inspector. But here, in this initial run, Blofeld Inspectors, they've been there from the start. Like they were actually there. Like even back in Russia, he was controlling things from the shadows. So I think it would have just been better to cap off Connery's 5 with him defeating his final big bad. Instead, we get on Her Majesty's Secret Service, where the pair don't recognize each other, and then he shows up in diamonds and escapes. They then sort of technically kill him at the start of For Your Eyes Only, which yeah, we can't say because of legal reasons, but yeah, everything's just a bit messy. I think the producers just didn't want to potentially kill their cash cow and just wanted Blofeld to remain for what was coming. Because obviously, Blofeld's biggest story is him killing Bond's wife. But I digress. In this time, Bond stops the rocket and sets off the self-destruct, which stops at 5 seconds. According to IMDb trivia, this was because this was the 5th film. We then watch as Blofeld does his own self-destruct and the lair starts to implode. It's bombastic and yeah, big way to end the film. We watch as the troops swim out into that poisonous cave from before, and then climb into the life rafts. Bond and Kissy end up in one themselves, which plays off all the water escapes in the previous films. Bond and Kissy kiss, and we watch as the submarine surfaces with the life raft on top of it. This is M's sub, and they pull this off by shooting the sub descending with the raft on top and then just reversing the footage.
Tell him to come below and report.
Is that a pun? Come below and report, is that a pun? I don't know, but in the book we cut back to London after his quote-unquote death. We then get a full chapter of his obituary, which is primarily written by M. As I said earlier, you know, they adapted this heavily into No Time to Die, and it's a really nice read that recounts all his history. They even talk about how a friend of Bond's came to write popular books around him. It's a very clear fourth wall break, but it adds a nice touch of reality. As someone reading this, you know, back when it was released, I can imagine thinking that he was dead as he went through it. However, we do get a final chapter which reveals he's still alive. To me, it's a better way to deliver the, you know, the only living twice twist that the movie does, and they leave some neat dangling threads. We discover that Kissy's indeed pregnant, and again, yeah, No Time to Die, mate. Took that as well. The final page is rather ominous though. Bond finds a note about Russia, and it starts to stir up memories. He knows it's connected to his past, and decides to head off to the country to learn who he is. Well left thinking he'll probably get captured by the Soviets and either tortured or killed. Come man with the golden gun, he's actually brainwashed and sent in to kill M as a sleeper cell, and yeah, ending on that, it's a bit of a gut punch. That ends the film and book though, and I spoke with Elma and Alana at the Dress to Kill podcast to talk about this movie's legacy. So I'm joined by Elma and Alana from the Dress to Kill podcast, where they talk about fashion in action and go over the looks from the films, epic impact and legacy, and basically what they did culturally from that point. So I actually listened to your You Only Live Twice podcast the other day with your mother, Dr. Linda, who I just want to big up for all the info that she brought across. And one thing that really hit me was kind of, I know you talked about how this is obviously a problematic film these days, but I was actually quite surprised back then that you touched upon, like there was the fear of nukes, the assassination of JFK was a big thing, and people were sort of looking for a masculine figure that knew what they were doing. So with all that in mind, as short as possible, it's quite a complicated question, but what are your thoughts on the complicated legacy that this film has?
Well, we were just speaking about this earlier, and this is kind of our podcast personal take, that we tend to see things as stepping stones. So while it's very problematic today, that film had to be brave and go and make those choices and make those moves, what was appropriate for that time for us to become and develop to where we are today. So we acknowledge the problems always, because that's what helps us grow in current media. But we really liked that. It seemed like that film was really aiming to be like an olive branch for Japan to the West. It had been 20 years since Pearl Harbor, so it was, at least from American culture, it was a good time to acknowledge Japan as like an equal in their capacity, in their political capacity, and in the big picture in the world. And as you had mentioned in one of our text exchange, this movie really showcased Japan so much, more than some other movies showcase other locations, other Bond movies. And it seemed like that was just such a nice, really acknowledgement of the culture and how powerful and epic they are in their own ways, which we love. And it really, I think, was an introduction to Japan for most people in the West. I don't think a lot of people, there wasn't Google back then. You couldn't just see what Tokyo looked like or what the beaches looked like. And Bond really set the stage with that film for so much culture around Japan to this day. Like, we were just talking earlier, Elma and I, about the tropes that we have even now that came from that. Like, these aren't all wonderful tropes, but when we were young, still the Japanese identifiers were like sumo culture, samurai culture, women being subservient, and all of that comes almost directly from that Bond film, we think.
No, I think the impact was like beyond, it was from our parents' generation or before that. And then it really seeped into our youth culture as well through like Austin Powers.
Sorry about that. I swear to God, that never happens.
And like all of these other things that picked up from the Bond movies. So our view of what is Japanese culture like really came from this. I mean, I have this view as well as how my cultural upbringing was, but it was like Alana's saying, a lot of it just comes from this Bond movie. So what a big impact that had is incredible.
Yeah, I think when watching Dr. No, though that's set in Jamaica, it doesn't really show off much of the lifestyle there. Like, I don't feel I've learned anything extra about Jamaicans from watching that movie. Whereas You Only Live Twice is kind of the opposite in that it delves into the commercial side of Tokyo, the big skyscrapers, like the neon signs that are kind of commonplace when you think of that city now in film. But you've also got the quaint side to it too, with like the fishing villages, even like the marriage, the weddings, and the Japanese castle and stuff. So in terms of that, do you think it's kind of given a positive image to Japan, or do you think it kind of reinforced some stereotypes?
It did both. I think a lot of people wanted to go to Japan because of this movie. Like, I was just telling Alana how I don't even know much about the seaside of Japan, and this is like my view. I get to see that in this movie. They really did go to different kinds of places, which around the country, which I love. They showed a little bit of the historical side with the Kyoto scenes, the Tokyo city, and the bustlingness of this newly developing city, and also the seaside where it's a little more country and quiet. And I love that they were able to show different parts of Japan. They leaned into stereotypes, but like Alana says, it was this olive branch and them taking a brave step to try to showcase what it was like in the East, which someone had to do it, right, in order to pave the way, like Alana is saying, for other films and other people to try to get it right.
Yeah, I think the way I kind of look at stuff with the Bond movies, where although it's problematic, it's not as problematic as some other films, because I think they treat everything with some dignity to it. I mean, even though he's, disguising himself as a Japanese man, he's not going in and being disrespectful to the culture. It's very much showing everything in a good light. And though there are problematic elements to it, I think there's a love for it. But I remember you saying on the podcast, they would do better if they knew better. Sound very British saying that. They would do better if they knew better. But that's kind of how I look at it. And though there's probably some negative things surrounding the film, I think overall it's probably had more of a positive impact because, we can still look back on it and be like, well, they shouldn't have done that. But there's a lot of things that I appreciate from it as well.
Yeah. Because also, I think when Fleming writes about going to Japan and stuff, it's shown with so much curiosity in his books. It just feels like he wants to learn, and he's really curious and just kind of absorbing all of this information and the foreignness and the differences, which, like you said, he doesn't really do that in Dr. No in Jamaica because he lived there. He probably already knew what things were like. It was cool to see that he showed so much curiosity, I thought.
I think in a lot of his work, the only people that I get the sense he doesn't like are Americans. But even then, he's kind of like Felix Leiter's Bond's best friend. But there's like a section where he talks about like fat tourists outside Buckingham Palace taking photographs of stuff and hoping to see the Queen. I'm like, whoa, Fleming.
Nice potty mouth, dirtbag.
That's half your audience you're slagging off there.
In thrilling cities, too, he talks like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
So just focusing on the fashion as well, what cultural fashion aspects can you see from this film that were brought across? And on the flip side of this, do you think there was any cultural aspects from the West that were brought across? Because I know Bond was very big in Japan at the time. You know, Sean Connery talked about getting mobbed. But there always feels like Japan gives so much love to the West. I mean, I know so many musicians that I've spoken to who are like, oh yeah, my album sells massively in Japan. And I think they just seem to embrace us quite a lot. So do you see anything going over there and vice versa?
Yeah, fashion specifically, I think Japan was more influenced by the West than the West was by Japan specifically. I think as you probably talked about how Japan was opening up to the West and vice versa. It was starting to become much more westernized in Tokyo after the war, after World War II. And they started really embracing like the, Jackie Kennedy style fashions. You see how Aki's character has like the beautiful blue on and when she first meets Bond. I feel like that's very Jackie Onassis. But I think beyond the fashion, what was interesting is how this global spy genre really took off at this time. And in Japan, they fully went with it. Like they embraced it. They loved it. There are all these like animes that came out. There was Lupin the Third and then Golgo 13 were two big ones that were influenced by James Bond specifically. I think it came out like the year after You Only Live Twice. And my mom would read the Golgo books. And I actually have the little stack of the Japanese version of a Bond comic books. There's 4 of them that were published I can grab them in a second, but they were published in like a magazine for like young men. And it was just really embraced by the culture. All the young boys loved it. I even asked my stepdad about how was it watching Goldfinger for the first time in the theater. He just said it was shocking.
Positively shocking.
Like it was like watching Star Wars for the first time. It was so new and different. But it was totally embraced by them. Okay, so they did a Majesties, Live and Let Die, Thunderball, and then they did one more, which I'm not sure, but it's Man with the Golden Gun. But the anime styles like this, can you see?
Yeah. So is it read the opposite way?
Yeah, exactly. And it's cute how they always start on page 007 for the first page.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so they've made the comic books, and then animes also came out, not Bond specific, Golgo 13, and then Lupin the Third, which I grew up watching. It was super part of my culture as a kid.
Yeah. Well, a new Bond trailers just came out today for the game. Did you get to see it?
I did.
Yeah.
I saw your reaction to it.
You watched it? Oh, no way. A fan. Yes.
Yeah, what'd you think? You do more video games than me.
Yeah, I'm a gamer too, so I can't wait to play.
Yeah.
It's funny, they have all these different, like, Bond totally looks different than what I would imagine like a video game Bond to look like, which is the first thing. Like he kind of feels more American to me. And then, but I love all the little action bits, and there's, I think, some parts with Moneypenny or someone that's like Moneypenny, and I can't wait to try.
They did make him seem so American. I'm blanking on the name. Do you guys, you're definitely going to know, who's the guy that's dating Zendaya?
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland. It really gave me, like, Tom Holland does really like playful, younger, excited, sassy kind of action dudes. And it really gave me like Tom Holland / American actor vibes. I guess partly because the character's meant to be younger, so maybe that's on purpose. But I was also taking cues. I'm like, okay, blue eyes, darker hair. Are you giving us hints? How are you going to release this right before and not? They have to match.
Yeah, it would be weird if they went with a totally different actor and then we've got these kind of two different Bonds. But it's all developing at the moment. I'm still hoping for the call. We'll see if I get it. If I do, I'll make sure to pop on the podcast. When are you doing another episode?
Yeah, we can't give any specific dates, but we're talking about some ideas, and definitely wanting to talk more about cultural impacts and films around Bond and action movies. Yeah.
It seems like
looking forward to it.
Bond is like in the air again. Can you feel like it really feels like there was a bit of hiatus, literally, and now it's kind of like it's coming back. I'm just starting to get more Bond in my dreams. I don't know. It's just back in the air. So the vibe shift has called us back slowly. So we're coming back, and so much exciting stuff is coming with Bond too. So it's a really fun time to be back and be able to discuss and be a part of the community and just have fun with that. Things have been so serious in the world. Let's just be playful and have fun and enjoy content.
Playful, more play, definitely. Yeah.
definitely. And that feels like the way they're going with it from what I've heard. So very excited to see what happens. Thank you very much for joining me. Check out the Dress to Kill podcast. Excellent, especially if you want to learn fashion as well. Like, that's my big thing at the moment. I'm actually learning how to dress and realizing that I didn't know as much as I thought. So yeah, thank you for joining me and take care.
Thank you for having us.
Well, anyway, that wraps up our breakdown of You Only Live Twice. And as always, we have our big Bond ranking. It's just that if you ask me what I'd rather watch again, I think all those other movies would beat it. I just feel that Goldfinger and Oddjob make for a better duo. There's several other love interests I think reign out on top. The car chases are better in the other films, and I even think Connery does better work in those too. And that would of course have bigger repercussions as well, with him then exiting the role. When we return, we'll be with George Lazenby, who, as I'm sure you know, was one and done. So it's probably the film that, out of all of these, I'm the most interested to go back to. It's the one I watched the least as a kid, and to be honest, I haven't really enjoyed it much in the times I've watched it since. However, this has a big following on the Bond community, with a lot of people saying it's their favourite. The book is absolutely brilliant as well, and I'm hoping that reading it will let me appreciate it more. So I'll see you over there, and if you guys want to get early access to that video, then please consider clicking the join button. For just 99 cents a month, you'll get early access to videos at least 1 week before everyone else. So please consider signing up, as it makes a massive difference. If you want something else to watch, you've also got a big breakdown on screen right now. So hopefully I'll see you over there, and with that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.